Welcome once again to 26 North Halsted. I'm your host, George Blaise. Well, here we are on the other side of the election. Donald Trump is the president-elect. If you remember back to somewhere around April or May, I had today's guest on before. We were making some predictions about what was happening. I got it completely wrong. He got it pretty much completely right. It's my pleasure to welcome back Chris Foltz from the Social Policy Institute. Chris, welcome back.
Hey, George, man, if the sweat's on my face, it's because of the state of the American population right now and being the one who called that.
No, I mean, you called it, and you didn't call it like you were enthusiastic about it, but there were just things that you saw happening on the ground in the campaigns and in just what was going on in America in general that, you know, having such a diverse background in politics yourself, being a former leader of the Young Republicans and then moving on to other things and things in your life. What is it that you saw on the ground earlier this year that let you know this was what was going to be the outcome?
You know, I guess I couldn't look at it necessarily as the Donald Trump campaign came in here with this overwhelming strategy that was just kind of kick butt. I think the state of the American voter is different this cycle. You know, people want change, and unfortunately, you know, change when you have a president that's been in office for 8 years, and you have had a Congress that's been, you know, kind of teeter-tottering on their effectiveness. The American people don't see it in their bank accounts, they don't see it in their jobs, and they want to see change no matter who it is. Unfortunately, I think the polls got it wrong because I don't think people were honest with themselves from the very beginning of this race in terms of what they actually wanted. I think a lot of people were fair-weathered along the process, and I was able to just call that ahead.
Is there too much emphasis put on polling data that comes out day to day to day? I mean, I was going on Real Clear Politics and looking at all the data day to day, watching it like fantasy football stats. Maybe we should just have 3 polling cycles and be done with it. I just don't know. How do we fix that?
You know, the problem with the polls is unless you really dig into them and look at, you know, they break them down fairly well, especially on Real Clear Politics in terms of demographics and regions. I think the traditional American voter doesn't necessarily understand what part of that matters. You know, what is the significance of this culture voting this way or this region voting this way and why? So it's almost, especially with the state of misinformation that's up there and fake news stories, it's almost impossible to see what is real. I know Trump really relied on the business kind of polls because of the accuracy in previous years. You know, the truth of the matter is that one fluctuated all over the place too. We really need to ask the ones that had 14 points for Hillary, what caused that 14-point spread?
Right, and you know, and looking at, you know, the 2 campaigns and what was presented, and you're talking about the American people in general were looking for change. Did the Democrats make a mistake in not paying enough attention to the Bernie Sanders bloc and what they were presenting, and perhaps the change there could have bled over to some of these other people?
You know, I truthfully think that that is the case. You know, a lot of people have been talking about, you know, the popular vote. Well, here you have a candidate that was a populist. You know, Donald Trump is very pragmatic. He's not very ideological. He's not afraid to change on the dime based on who he talked to in the room prior to coming into that room. So with that, it's very hard to plan a campaign against that, just because, quite frankly, there's no real strategy from a campaign sense. There may be a strategy inside the candidate. And I think that's what kind of shone through this. I mean, it's clearly apparent with just the overturns inside of his campaign that he wasn't feeling that his way of running the campaign was being done. So he just handled it the way that he saw best, being Donald Trump.
Well, there's certainly several people who really were standing there bearing the torch for Donald in the media, in the press the whole time, who are going to be greatly rewarded now, I assume. You know, not the least of which was Reince Priebus, who, you know, here's someone who they thought this is the end of this man's career. If the party's going to implode and this guy is done, and now he stands to be, you know, one of the leading people of the executive branch of the government.
You know, I find it interesting that they're referencing him now as one of the greatest Republican Party leaders of all time. There was also a period of time where they said he's one of the worst Republican Party leaders of all time.
If you watch the convention, you're like, oh, this is done.
Yeah, you think he's done. But, you know, that just goes to show how fair-weathered politics is. It's not a Republican or a Democrat thing. We saw Howard Dean. You know, here's a person that when he was running for president had his problems and he was kind of pushed out of the arena, then came in to be a dynamic leader for the party. And I spent some time with Howard Dean. I have not met the new, I guess it would be Chief of Staff-elect, the presumptive Chief of Staff. I've not met him, but I have spent a lot of time in the Republican Party. And I will say that he is different than other party leaders, both in age, you know, kind of his candor, his way of doing things, but he's also not afraid to stay with the stand that he has. He's not afraid to be ideological, but he's also very dynamic in the ability that he can change people's perceptions on the ideas.
Well, we have, you know, we're looking at the executive now. You got Mike Pence. Interesting character, to say the least. A lot of people who didn't know a lot about him now are learning more and more about him as a person. Where does he fall in terms of what the atmosphere is going to be at the White House?
You know, I would say this. For all the people that are upset about the Trump administration, having Mike Pence in there, remove his opinions and his actions and his ideologies. It's a good cop, bad cop thing. And it's good to have somebody like Pence in there to at least be the good cop. Look at the reaction to the Hamilton. Here you have Pence kind of being an upright, very presidential, very vice presidential, saying this is what makes America great. You know, they have the ability to speak their mind. I have the ability to come to this show and watch it. Whereas Donald Trump kind of took what you would consider to be a sophomoric approach, saying, you know what, I demand an apology. I demand this. You really, you know, the rules of traditional political nomenclature, the rules of what a president is and what is not, are gone. And the faster that people realize that, the more that they're going to be able to actually do something opportunity-wise inside this administration, regardless of your political beliefs.
Well, I mean, certainly people have, you know, what I think are some very valid concerns regarding, you know, the approach that this executive is going to take towards legislation, things that are going on around the country. You know, the hesitance for Donald Trump to criticize or to say anything bad about the alt-right or some of these other people who've supported him through this campaign, that's problematic. Why won't he just spend 5 minutes in front of the camera and be like, look, these people are garbage, they don't represent us, they don't represent America?
You know, I personally don't believe Donald Trump is this kind of racist or this kind of bigot that some would say. If he was giving the keynote address at the convention that was in D.C. the other day, that'd be a different story. He's got an ego, and he also is a very loyal person. He knows that part of the large reason why he was elected was because of the alt-right movement, whether you agree to it or not. It's much similar to the evangelicals helping George W. Bush take over that race. The truth of the matter is, you know, he has to take a stand, and I think he has taken a stand slightly over the last couple of days. Having Bannon in place, actually, I think is a better thing for the American people. I personally don't agree with racism. Right. I don't agree with everything.
Right. I don't want to interrupt you in the middle of this thought. So I want to take a short break now. I want to come back to this thought of Steve Bannon is a good thing for the American people. We're gonna talk about it right here. Don't go anywhere. Put your Cheerios down. We'll be right back. Welcome back to 26 North Halsted, talking about President-elect Trump and what it means moving forward in our national conversation we'll be having for the next at least 4 years, if not 8 years. Joining me, Chris Foltz from the Social Policy Institute. Chris, before the break, you were saying Steve Bannon could be a good thing.
Correct.
I want you to flesh this out.
And you know what?
For me.
It's not for the reasons. Again, I don't stand for any of the races. As a matter of fact, I'm not even a fan of Breitbart, just the way that the news is done. The truth of the matter is it puts Steve Bannon not in a kitchen cabinet position. I found through the years working with presidents and campaigns that some of the most influential people on the leaders are the people that are in their kitchen cabinet, in the unofficial positions on the side. This is as close to putting him in front of the media attention as possible. The larger position he has means that the moment that anything starts going wrong in the administration, it gives a blame. Not that they're saying they're going to blame Bannon, but, you know, he's probably the most extreme one right now of all of the announcements. And, you know, quite frankly, the alt-right are the people that helped Trump get elected. And he's a very loyal person. He needed to give them, you know, I guess some skin in the game. I know it's very controversial. I really do. But the truth of the matter is the American people will have the ability to adjust. And if that's the reason why Trump doesn't get reelected, well, then I guess they won.
It seems to me, I mean, you know, as a father and trying to, you know, put as much humanity into looking at Donald Trump as I can and to try and be fair about things, you know, his daughter is married to Jared Kushner. Who he and his father, followers of Chabad Lubavitch, I believe, Orthodox Jews. His daughter had to convert to get married. It would seem difficult for him to have someone so close to him that was an open anti-Semite, as much as everyone is saying. I have problems understanding if that can really be the case, or, you know, if things are being exaggerated to some extent.
You know, I would say there's exaggerations in all facets of this campaign. You know, I don't know if I've read anything that Bannon specifically has come out and been anti-Semitic.
It's more so about Breitbart News.
Breitbart in general. Right. Now, obviously he's left that position. You know, when it boils down to it, all media, you know, this is one of the great things about media. If we want to, stop visiting Breitbart. Stop visiting Breitbart. If you don't like what Donald Trump is saying on Twitter, stop using your Twitter account. Stop playing into the game, because here what you have is a person that is driven by ego. And if anybody in America feels that anybody, whether it be chief of staff or a senior strategist, is going to be able to change what this person already has in their mind, they have another thing coming to them. You have a populist elector, and right now, Bannon is not a very popular choice. So to a president like Donald Trump, which he will be, that and where it weighs in on his decision, I don't think it's going to be the same way that the American people are playing out. When it comes down to the anti-Semitic thing, well, I can tell you this. You know, I personally spent a lot of time looking for Donald Trump saying completely negative remarks. And it's hard to find them, but his choices aren't making it any easier for the American people.
Yes, I guess that's
Yeah.
what it is. And, and we started to look at it. He's putting his cabinet together now. Just today, I believe, UN ambassador is going to be Haley Barbour.
No, it's actually the governor of South Carolina. I can't remember. I believe her last name might be Haley.
Hey, I'm sorry, Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley. There
I'm
you go.
sorry, that's what it is.
Interesting, she is the daughter of immigrants. Both her parents from India. And one of the things I like about it is she was a steadfast supporter of another candidate in the primaries. She kind of teetered and tottered.
Right.
And I think a lot of people need to realize that the whole elevator camera shots that are happening outside of Trump Tower, a lot of that is just posturing. A lot of it's just positioning. The people that come in to meet with the president-elect, if you notice some of them, animately against Donald Trump during parts of the campaign. I find it to be an interesting choice. What's more interesting is it's maintaining as a cabinet level position. So here you do have the first female, I guess, inside the cabinet that's been announced.
It's kind of like in the Godfather when everyone's coming to the wedding to kiss the ring.
It's exactly.
I mean, that's kind of what it is. Like everyone's like, sorry if I said anything bad about you. You won. You're the boss. I got to kiss your ring if I'm going to get anything done.
It is, and you know what? And quite frankly, I think it helps a little bit in the regards of the American people seeing the true character of the ones. So if you're in there talking bad about President-elect Trump, and then you're one of the first people that's there at Trump Tower getting the position, you need to reevaluate that person and not just put all your attention on what Trump's decisions are.
Well, one of the first decisions he made was to burn everybody associated with our New Jersey governor there, and that whole thing, which I found interesting. Like, okay, at least there's something in here saying, okay, we have to be clean about this operation.
It was surprising. Christie, besides many people saying I look like him or at least size like him, I think Christie's a great guy when it comes down to it. I don't think it was actually benefiting the administration the way that it needed to. In the way that we're looking right now, you have regional players in both Trump and Christie, and I don't think it actually brings the dynamic nature that he's trying to build in terms of a national agenda, bringing another person so close to the administration.
What do you think is the most vital or key position in the cabinet that you're going to see in this term?
This particular term, you're going to be dealing with things like commerce. It's going to be, and I think environmental related issues.
Really?
When you look at the environment right now, he wants to remove regulations on various things. He wants to make it easier for clean burning coal and oil and all this. I'm not against that if the same regulations are lifted on things like solar and same regulations are lifted on things like wind. In California, it's almost impossible to collect rainwater and use it without receiving some sort of tax and tariff. And you can't just take it off one thing, especially when the American population is so polarized in their opinion about the environment, and not take it off other things. So I think that person is going to play a huge role. Another thing that will play a role, anything that has to do with judicial and law. Attorney General, there's a big cost in America that deals with criminal and judicial and prisons. And according to Donald Trump, he's more of a law and order type president. How much power is going to be given in and how much cost is going to be associated with that in his new administration is up for debate.
We got to really take a close look at these things. Of course, he's laid out what he's going to do the first 100 days. Of course, key on that is repealing of the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. Can you really repeal the entire Obamacare without, destroying the lives of tens of millions of people who are now dependent on it?
I think he's teetering on that. I think he'll continue to teeter on that. And quite frankly, it's a limited capacity what the president can do. And I think it's time for everybody in America to take a look back just at the Constitution and start focusing in on some of the real places of change. And right now, it takes a lot of acts of Congress, the House, and the Senate to even do some of the things that are outlined in his first 100 days. So I'd get on the phone with your state representatives, and I'd get on the phone with your future elected officials and figure out what it is that their actual positions are and see if you can change favor that way.
That's the way to, don't be worried, get involved, I guess, if there's anything. But, going back to, some of the first things you were saying when we got here today is the fact that, people were looking for some kind of change, and that just wasn't represented in the Clinton campaign this time around. And change can go either way, and it's, it's never going to be, it's going to hurt. It's never going to be easy. Medicine doesn't always taste good, but perhaps is there a way we can look at these things and be like, this is the medicine we needed as a country to shake things up and to really get everyone involved.
I do think that it does change a little bit of the apathetic approach. But, when it comes down to it, protesting in the streets isn't necessarily getting the job done, and there are plenty of other ways that we can talk about.
I tell you what, let's take a short break. When we come back, I want to talk about the protests that are going on. Stay tuned. More with Chris Foltz when we return. Welcome back to 26 North Halsted. A great conversation we're having with Chris Foltz from the Social Policy Institute. Chris, we left talking about protests that are going on. A lot of what you're seeing out there, and I said this on a previous episode of the program, are things that were organized and paid for before the election even happened. And I'm just going to lay that out there for you. There are organizations out there that whether Hillary won or whether Donald Trump won, these things were going to happen. So that there's a lot of energy in that. But on the other side, there are a lot of people that are angry. There are a lot of people that are out there. They're marching in the streets. Is that accomplishing much?
Well, I look at it like this. Protesting, if you go back in the day, protesting was done in the 60s and an Equal Rights Amendment, and it was done as a method of awareness. We didn't have the type of internet, we didn't have the type of 24-hour media that we do nowadays. So the element of protest for awareness has kind of fallen by the wayside. If you look at Black Friday last year in Chicago and how much it impacted the stores, I think when you start impacting people in their finances and their pocketbooks, then you see a more effective form of protesting nowadays. If all the people went out there and looked at the corporations that donated money to the candidate that they don't support, the one they're protesting against, and as opposed to going out on the street and costing the taxpayers additional money and safety concerns, why don't they just stop buying their products? But then don't just stop buying their products. Let them know that the reason I'm not buying your product anymore is because your company's donating money to a candidate I don't believe in, to a candidate for this reason. Mm-hmm. I think when you live in a capitalistic environment, you need to address things where it hurts people the most. And in America right now, it appears to be finances that actually dictate what things get done. So I think that's a much stronger form of protest.
If for those who are really upset and really feeling that injustice is happening and growing in this country, is it naive to find solace in the idea that the sheer weight, size, and breadth of the bureaucracy of the United States government is far too large for quick things to happen? You're not going to all of a sudden be rounding people up and shipping them over the border in 2 years. I mean, is there some solace to be found in that? Or is that just naive notion that, yes, by executive order, things can start happening?
There are some things that the president can enact with executive order, and it's mainly just instructionary type things that can be done. With how long it takes things to get done, most of the decisions, like let's say that the president appointed a new Supreme Court justice, and let's say that day they wanted to repeal Roe versus Wade. First thing on the agenda. The likelihood of that getting all the way through the system in a quick period of time is almost unheard of. And the likelihood of Supreme Court justices not needing to be replaced in that period of time by the next president is also equally as unheard of. No matter what, it's going to take a while for a lot of changes to come into place. What's more important is for people to think about what they can do today. In Illinois and a lot of cities across America, municipal elections are in the spring. You have statewide elections in the fall. You have congressional elections again. Realize no matter what happens in Washington, Republicans want to bring power back to the locals, whether it be on education, this, that, and the other. So what matters then is your local school board. What matters then is your local city officials and how they enact some of the laws. Illinois is a home rule state. So regardless if the federal government says abortion's legal or abortion's not legal, if a municipality doesn't want an abortion clinic in that town and it's home rule, it's not going to be there anyway. So that's where Americans need to start their battles at the local level starting now.
So this brings us back to the point that perhaps there is good medicine in what's going on now for those who have lost heart, in the fact that here locally, perhaps it's time to really look at shaking the tree, breaking down the Democratic hold and machine that's here in Cook County in Illinois, and really building a progressive caucus that really does something, slating some candidates that really have progressive notions that are going to take us the next 25 years, as opposed to just voting the way we voted for the past 70.
And that's one of the things that I find really interesting. When you're looking at this election cycle, there is going to be a lot of change no matter which way you look at it. But what should be the first change? There should be record voter registration. There should be record everything, because what the media is coming out and saying is, like the people that were arrested in Portland for protesting, they didn't register to vote. They weren't voters. They didn't vote in this election, but yet they're still out there protesting. Well, if this isn't the time to go out there, and if you've lost faith and you think that your vote doesn't matter, well, I can absolutely assure you that's not the case, because while people are complaining about the popular vote in the Electoral College, it's a fact that when there's a larger spread in the popular vote, it's almost impossible for the Electoral College to vote for the person that didn't win the popular vote. And that's another thing that people are complaining about, the Electoral College.
And I think at the last number as I saw, we're over 1.2 million
let's just say there was 2 million. Let's just round it up to 2 million. Right. The truth of the matter is, look at Illinois. Do all the people in southern Illinois deserve to not have their votes for Donald Trump be heard? Because Illinois' Electoral College votes all go to Hillary Clinton. And what a lot of people don't realize is in the urban cities, where they have less voter turnout, when they have less registrations percentage-wise, that Electoral College is the only thing that's making sure that those people that didn't vote are also also represented, and realize the Electoral College is actually skewed where there's larger population densities. So it's already skewed in the favor of the Democrat-leaning cities, just because when you have 10% voter turnout, it's not like you only get 10% of your Electoral College votes.
Right.
You get all of them.
And it's interesting when you look at the Illinois map, it's mostly red except for Cook County.
Yeah, and if you look at the American map, somebody
Right.
put up this awesome graphic where it showed dots all over. People can't believe everything they see. So when you see a map that says Chicago, California, New York would decide the population if we didn't have an Electoral College, well, that's just as untrue as that.
It's more complicated than that, but certainly it's something that needs to be looked at for people who have concerns about what we just witnessed. But this is the process. We've all signed into this, and this is the process we have. I think that saying that something was unfair or was wrong about this election would be false. I think people's assumptions about what it takes to win a national election here were what was false.
I think the most important thing that people need to realize is equality is not really the thing that it was. It's more about what is fair versus equal, because for every time that we allow for a new demographic to exist, a new way for someone to be titled, a new hipster, a new way that somebody wants to be represented, it actually makes it harder for things to be equal. There's not proportionate levels of population in every demographic. There's not proportional levels of population spread throughout the country. So equality is much harder. We need to focus on what is fair for the entire population versus what is equal for individual demographics, because equality is actually going to shut down people having the ability to rise and be who they are, because there's not another one of them. They're never going to have a chance being equal.
It's an interesting notion, and we're living in interesting. May you live in interesting times. I think that was
very
the quote. Let's take another short break. We'll have some closing thoughts in just a moment. Welcome back to 26 North Halsted. No, we're not going to get this whole thing solved or worked out in a half hour, so you're going to have to keep tuning in every week right here with me and my guests talking about the stuff. Chris Foltz from the Social Policy Institute. As far as taxes are concerned, tax code, Donald Trump is putting forth a plan where he's going to lower taxes across the board for businesses and for the upper echelons. We've seen this thing before. It did not work. There's no guarantee that just because the wealthy are not paying taxes that they're going to throw that into creating jobs. I think they throw that into their bank accounts, 401ks and Roth.
I personally think the whole tax structure in general needs to be changed in America, and I don't think I think the income tax in general should be changed to more of a sales tax. But that's my own personal opinion. When it comes down to this, he wants to change from 7 tax brackets down to 3. So you're looking at lower income, middle income, and higher income. The challenge to this is the smallest percentage of reductions at the highest income, but it still equates for the majority of the money in America. So there's going to be larger dollars saved for rich people than there are going to be dollars saved for poor people. Is this right? I don't know. Economic stimulus is what's needed. So if that comes with jobs, and that comes with real opportunity, and that comes with people regaining their ability to stand up for what they believe in, I think it's going to work out. If it comes down to the thing where people just sit on their money and keep making money
that's
off
what
their
we've
money,
seen historically. That's what happens.
I think there needs to be a tax on people that just sit on their money. Look at Illinois' governor. Regardless of what you believe in, he made $200 million last year. He did pay over $50 million in taxes. But that $200 million he was able to make while being a full-time governor. So I think people that sit on their money and make money off of money as a mechanism, they should face a larger tax.
And that's one of the things that, one of the best arguments I've ever heard regarding this whole idea of, that the wealthy are the job creators, so we need to give them the most tax breaks. Well, no, the job creators are the middle class. People who are out there buying things and consuming things and going out and shopping on Black Friday and during the holiday season, spending money and invigorating the economy. It's these people that generate the jobs. The extra jobs you see in the holidays are direct results of middle class people going out and buying gifts for their families. It's not about rich people hoarding money. So I don't even understand why this is still an argument.
It's some form of trickle-down economics, Reagan era. I'll put it like this. Some of the greatest ideas I've ever seen for social services, some of the greatest job creators I've ever met are all Democrats. And the one problem they've had is never been in the right time financially to be able to basically implement some of their ideas, implement some of the jobs they have. So maybe now with a little bit more money in their pocketbooks, they have an opportunity to rise. But I can tell you this, it all comes down with taking a stand. And as opposed to protesting on the street, reevaluating how you spend your money this upcoming year, start saving money right there, protest at the bank account, protest at the stores. Because when you start doing that, you're going to see an actual change. You're going to see these policies getting switched towards something that represents the middle class America, because they are the big consumers. and that's what matters.
Chris, in the last couple of minutes here, what's paramount? You sent me a video the other day of a robotic wheelchair watering and planting crops. What are you, Elon Musk? What's going on?
Yeah, we've got a lot of crazy things going on. Basically, it's like this. I want to look at some of these areas that we have in Chicago, look at some of these areas across the country, and put in some organic farms, bring in some real vegetables, bring in some stuff to help the communities. And especially with all the regulations we have right now, it's kind of hard. But the truth of the matter is, one of the biggest challenges is maintenance. So I'm going to eliminate that. I want to get jobs back to veterans. I want to give jobs to the disabled, managing some of these farms in the neighborhoods. And robotic technology is kind of cool. So we're going to take advantage of it.
For people who want to keep up with your work, where can they go?
Socialpolicyinstitute.org. We're going to be launching a whole thing that helps translate the Trump administration from a completely unbiased standpoint. If anybody needs any help with any of this stuff, reach out to me at socialpolicyinstitute.org. I will help you get your message off the streets and protest into something that actually makes some change for you at no charge at all. Let's just get it done.
Well, that's fantastic. Chris, good to see you
Thank
again.
you, George. Always a pleasure.
If I don't see you, happy holidays.
Thank
if I
you.
don't, well, I am going to see you guys next week. So you're going to tune in right here on 26 North Halsted. See you then.